Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV's Monday Night Podcast. I am Gally, and will be hosting tonight along with Mr. Bickler from North Carolina. How are you, my friend?
What's crapping in? It's Monday. Let's get it.
Yeah, I figure we'll get at it. It's the middle of the, as I like to call it, and we always say on this program, the dreaded international break. Sir Z jumps in. Good morning, gents. I'm not sure if it's morning, afternoon, or good night, Sir Z, but we appreciate you jumping in. I don't know if that was just a comment that was queued up for the morning show this morning when he saw that post, or he's just trying to make jokes. He wants to remind everyone, aka the 5K Legends. And in all seriousness, thank you very much, Sir Z, not only for your participation during our fundraiser that we did, but for the recognition. We made posts this week. We did eclipse the $5,000 mark, and we have shipped off the funds to Jamie Carragher and the 23 Foundation. So we're excited to see where that $5,000 will go to support children's services and needs. Alan Walnut jumps in. Good evening, gentlemen. Brian Shelton says, evening, guys, and Sir Z has corrected himself. He has recognized it is actually nighttime. That's what happens when you spend all day writing books, going to book signings, and doing all kinds of things that published authors do. You lose track of the daylight hours. As you guys can tell, the Turkish one is not with us tonight. I guess that's what happens when you put the three of us in a room together for the first time ever. We decide we can't even get together virtually for a few weeks. We need some separation. All seriousness, Timuchin is finalizing his vacation with his brother and his nephew who came over from Turkey. He was bringing them over to the airport today. So we wish him the best in all he is doing this evening. So let's get at it, Paul. We'll start the way we start every Monday. Oh, nope, we don't. It's just fun to show that image, maybe make Alan excited and make him realize Cosby will not get to prove that I am not that smart tonight. The international break comes, and this is me looking forward to the next Premier League weekend, and the international break just stomps on my head. Paul, I know you're not a fan of the international break, but outside of watching Michigan football and Detroit football in a weekend that you probably only care about one of the two results, how have you gotten through this international break, and are you surviving?
I'm going to sneak in a big, uniquely niche American thing. So apologies to the international audience. The thing that saved my weekend, sporting-wise, and watching American football, was watching the formerly great Nebraska program smash the ever-loving daylight out of Colorado and Deion Sanders and all of his offspring. And it was just insanely glorious to watch for a myriad of reasons. I hate that I'm the type of petty that watching somebody else lose makes my weekend when my team loses, but I'm going to own it and I'm going to embrace it.
I appreciate it. And I think that there is something to that. I mean, there is a little of that Schadenfreude when it comes to watching sports in the United States. You learn what you need to do. And, you know, people always say, right, there's like, I think Kazi talks about it. It's two things that happen every Premier League weekend. I get to root for Liverpool to win, and I get to root for Everton to lose. Like, it doesn't really matter. And there's sometimes, like, we draw, and then he's, like, giddy in the afternoon in Discord because Everton capitulates a late lead against Bournemouth. And he's like, but listen, man, we're going to draw football matches. They will not lose like this every day. And if you lived over there, you'd understand. And I do remember those days of, like, living on Yankees, Red Sox, and what it was like going to work in a Connecticut office that it was 50-50 when they were at their heyday of kind of that hatred and vitriol back and forth or signing players. So I totally understand that. I love rooting for others' demise as well. Not rooting for the demise, but a little bit of an interesting comment. We're going to touch on some news that's coming out, some comments that have been made, but we touched on this a little bit here. But Quayman Kelleher has made some statements while away on international duty with Ireland. He says, my ambition has always been clear and has been clear the last few seasons that I want to be a number one and play week in, week out. And sometimes the outside looking in, like that's 100% my decision, but at times it's not always in my hands. So, Paul, let's just break this down for anyone out there that maybe hasn't been in our Discord, seen the arguments and or discussions we've been having. For me, this isn't news.
Right.
This is no shocking, no big surprise. The player wants to be number one somewhere. He thinks he deserves it, but no club has come in and met evaluation. Is this him saying, come and get me to someone, or is this him trying to gain public favor, knowing the club just went out and signed a keeper? Because these comments go on when he's asked, and he actually says they went out and signed a potential goalkeeper for the future. They clearly don't see that as me. He basically blames the club for kind of Sepp Vandenberging him and overvaluing him and keeping him there. Do you see that in this situation, or do you think there isn't the market he believes there is for him out there that the club determines they need?
Well, he's in his feelings a little bit right now, right? And that's fine. I think you're right. I think you nailed the head, right on the head when you said, like, he feels a little bit like, we Sepp Vandenberg him. Guess what? We got that money for Sepp Vandenberg, right?
Well, this is my point.
So, like, I think is he asking people to come get him? Sure, right? Is he salty that people have tried to and haven't gotten him? Sure. Does that mean the club is doing him dirty? No, it doesn't. It means that there's a valuation for that player. Bottom line is he's speaking like a player who's under contract that doesn't have leverage, which is exactly what he is. And like we may not like that from a supporter standpoint, but the fact of the matter is they're running a business. And if they got a player they know can go for 20-25, why would they sell him for half that? Like, that's not how that's done. Like if you want to be sustainable and do good business and continue to make money and be able to roll that forward to transfers, that's not what Liverpool is known to do business like. I don't know why they change it for one goalkeeper who's been loyal, right? So I think it makes sense for both parties. I think he deserves to be number one somewhere else. I also think the club deserves to get what his value is.
Sir Z says he deserves a number one spot. Forest offering $7 million plus their American keeper was a kick in the nuts. I don't disagree. The Forest offer was a joke. I think Celtic was in at one point at 10-12. And I think maybe if you could have gotten that to like 15. I think what they really believed was that a Premier League side was going to come in for him at about 18-20 or 20 plus add-ons, a sell-on clause, something like that. And then the late summer rumbling that Juventus was interested and Italian teams were interested. I just wonder if they felt like maybe we can get this to 20-25 million. Maybe we can build this up like we did Sepp. My argument is I don't even know that he has the market that Sepp has. So yes, he has had some small moments, right? Like pockets. These aren't long-standing. He's never had 15, 20 matches in a row where he was this world beater of a keeper. And I think until you've shown that, and at times he doesn't look very comfortable with the ball at his feet, and that's the way that all these sides are trying to play nowadays. I actually wonder, do you think in some ways is he kind of an old school keeper and he kind of needed the move 2 years ago? Did Liverpool maybe miss the mark? Not selling the player coming off winning the 2 cups and the big run and taking the game-winning penalty and all that stuff that came with it.
Yeah, well, I think that's when you should have sold him, right? It's probably also the time in which you would have gotten the most backlash from supporters about selling him, right? And I think the bottom line is that I don't think they wanted to sell him without a succession plan in place, right? So that clearly happened. Now it's more attractive. So maybe this is a trade-off. Maybe you take 15. Maybe you take 16 if it's there, when you're not trying to hit that 20 mark. Because I think if you sold him around Cup time, I think somebody would have come in, and I think you would have got north of 20 for him. I really do.
So Z says, really surprised Newcastle didn't come in for him or even Chelsea. Obviously, I think those are jokes because both sides at one point had half a dozen keepers each. I still am trying to figure out how on deadline day Newcastle thought the best way to spend 20 million was to buy James Trafford. And I think the kid's going to be a great keeper, but he had a pretty rough first season at Burnley in the Premier League and probably needs more time playing. And Nick Pope seems like a pretty good keeper that has actually made your defense better again now that he's back in between the sticks instead of Dubravka. Brian Shelton says a solid $15 to $18 million keeper. I think he agrees with you. I'm hoping he gets enough minutes between the Champions League, the extra matches, hopefully a deep League Cup or FA Cup, and he can rebuild that value up to where he is clearly a $15 to $25 million keeper that you can sell. I get the comments. I get talking when you're asked a question, and he's already said it once, so it doesn't bother me. I don't love they went out and bought a goalkeeper because that just drums up the supporters all saying things like they don't have faith in our players and they buy this guy who nobody knows. Like, let's not act like nobody knows.
Yeah.
Kelleher's going to have to go 3 levels to get to the level this kid's at right now, let alone the level this kid might get to. They're not even on the same stratosphere. And if we take off our rosy red Liverpool glasses, we would all see that, I believe. So I just hope that the young man gets a big shot. It goes to a club, maybe playing a step above the lower level Premier League teams, because I think he is that good. But let's be real. He won a couple cups. I don't think he's actually a Champions League quality caliber.
Careful.
No, I'm serious. I don't think he's a Champions League level goalkeeper right now because he played well in the Moose Cup.
I'm a little bit shocked that this is such an issue with supporters. You know what I mean? Like, I feel
that's
like
a keeper.
He is what we thought he was for a long time. Like, we've known this, right? Like, I don't think did people really think that Allison was going to step away in 3 or 4 years and it was going to be Kelleher because A, he's capable, and B, he would wait that long? Because I don't think either of those seem like realistic things that were ever going to happen. I'm a little bit surprised it's even an issue for people.
And I don't want to put words in Brian's, in Brian's statement here or put thoughts behind it, but ultimately, the idea of the Georgian keeper is an investment. He was not bought to sell. He was bought to start at Liverpool for a decade. This is what Edwards does. When he makes this type of investment, he bought a player on the up. He may not start for 2 years because I still think he's going to go on another loan next year. I just think he's going to get loaned to an English side that's going to give him the ability to learn the country, the landscape, the stadiums, the style of play, the speed, the defenders. Maybe it'll be at a Bournemouth. Maybe it'll be at a different club. He is starting as soon as to me, unless Allison signs a 1-year extension, I mean, they're not going to keep giving these 30-plus-year-olds. I know all we want to talk about is, but I do see what he says. That's what he meant. But I just think that this was a smart buy. This was a good buy. This was the buy we've been asking them to do 2-3 years before a player has to leave the club, or you think the player might leave the club. Because there were rumblings that Allison was interested in the Saudi move. And who knows, maybe next year the big money ticket offer comes in and he wants to take it. How nice is it to have a replacement and not have the best keeper in the world walking out the door and have every club in the world trying to fleece you for all the money that you have?
I think it's funny, we talk about not being reactive enough in like having plans in place for when players leave and we just get rid of these players. And then we have a summer in which we basically have a goalkeeper succession plan. And we have Chiesa, who, I got news for you, maybe Mo's succession plan.
100%.
And I think people don't really like that. People just are passing that by. And I think that's a major storyline.
Completely agree. And I think that they're looking for it in a few other positions as well. And I think it's why we didn't buy a Virgil left-sided center back, because I don't think they believe they had the chance this window to get the actual replacement. So they didn't buy a backup. They just kept Joe Gomez because that's the way they do business. Speaking of a very young, talented young man who was also talking today, um, Jarrell Quansah on orange slot, taking him off against Ipswich. It's never a nice feeling as a footballer to be subbed off at halftime, but at the end of the day, it was the gaffer's decision. Obviously, it worked. I can only focus on myself and try to improve. I purposely trained the next day so I could get it out of my head and kick on and look forward to the next game. Really, that's all it's ever been. I've just been waiting for the opportunity. So, Paul, I love the statement. I love the statement a hell of a lot more than the visual he gave during the second half, where he looked disinterested when we scored go ahead goals. That said, I also am not going to judge the young man for the first time he was asked at 19 to be more mature than me because, well, he's 19 and that statement lets you know he's more mature than me. How do you take that statement? How do you think the manager takes that statement?
Well, I think the manager takes it great. I mean, I hear that statement. I think if that's really this kid's mentality, if that's genuine and it hasn't been doctored up and gone over in a mirror, which I don't think it is, it feels pretty genuine. If that is his genuine mentality, he'll be back and he's going to be great.
Yeah, very professional from Quansah, says Brian Shelton, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think it shows that both the manager is understanding his players, and that these players truly understand the manager and what he wants from them. And I think that this relationship is of head coach, and he made it very clear he likes being a head coach because he likes to focus on the players and what happens on the pitch and not the drama behind it. Clearly, he is attached to everything happening because he has an answer for every single question someone has, and he's ready for it. To me, the most refreshing thing has been how he's handled the squad, how he's handled rotation, how he nipped the Trent thing on the bench quickly by walking right over to him and sitting down with him and like whispering, talking under his hand and just basically being like, whatever your attitude is, you're going to get rid of that right now. Like, this shit ain't fine. And I know all the people out there with the memes like, Jurgen never took me off, and he's like, Jurgen ain't here anymore. Like, that's basic, and it looks like that's the attitude, because every time he's asked a question, he's so refreshingly honest and direct.
Right.
Like, just, and I know we all talk about how Van Gaal was direct, and Ten Hag is direct, and Koeman is direct. There's a difference between being direct and being a douche. And I think he's figured out how to balance that. Because he makes sure the reporters know, like, I'm not giving you everything you want, and you're not going to ask me these things 9 different times if they're stupid questions. But if you ask me a real question about why I did something, I'll explain to you why I did it, because it's just a waste of time to talk in circles and talk coach speak. So where does this go here? Where does this go from here? Does Quansah get that first start with Joe Gomez, in your opinion, against West Ham? At home in the Moose Cup middle of next week? Or do you think there's a chance he gets reinstated against Forest? I have a hard time with it being Chris Wood, a big point forward, and the whole point of putting Konate on was to deal with the lapsed little kid. I can't imagine you then send Quansah back out there to get maybe muscled off the ball and have this all start again, right? It has to be West Ham, probably.
I would imagine so, but I do think he's going to I think Konate is going to have to lose this job. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think Quansah is going to get back to like being in Konate's area and then just kind of slowly cede minutes over to Quansah. I think Konate is going to have to lose this job either through injury or bad form. So, but yeah, that's the next start that makes the most sense. I agree with you. I don't think they're going to put him up against a bruiser like Chris Wood on his first match back for sure.
So we will talk about a little bit about the Forest match a little bit later. Champions League draw came out here last week. We are not going to pretend to try to understand everything, but I did find this graphic here. I wanted to get your input on it, Paul. So obviously, the new format of the Champions League has been changed. There are now 36 teams instead of 32. We've gone away from groups of 4. But ultimately, it's not that much different. The more I've crunched the numbers, the real difference now is a third of the teams go into a knockout round, which is basically like, it's almost like they got what they wanted. They added 4 more teams, another group, and first, second, and third all go on. So basically, everyone's going to play 8 matches, randomly selected by a computer. There's some tasty ones in there, let me tell you. They're all going to play. It'll be a Swiss-style format where everyone's in one big table, where the top 8 teams automatically qualify for the quarterfinals. And the remaining next 16 teams, so teams that finish from 9th to 24th place in that order, will be slotted against each other in what they call the knockout round, which I like to call the round of 32. Against each other based on where they finish. I have to, before we look at Liverpool's fixtures and how this broke out for the club, what are your initial thoughts on the new Super League? I mean, Champions League.
Wow.
That UEFA created.
Listen, like, there's a couple things. The one thing that strikes me is that I'm at this point in my life where, like, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting old, but I'm not there yet. But, like, the reason I'm starting to feel old is I'm starting to identify with things I see in, like, my old drunk uncles, like how resistant to any sort of progression and change they are. Anytime something like this happens, I immediately hate it unless it's expanded playoffs in college football. Like, if it's not that, like, I'm immediately like, this is an awful idea, right? Like, the changes they were making in baseball, I originally hated. I now come to like them, right? So I originally thought this was just a scheme for more games, and I was going to hate this, right? But the more I look at it and the more I think about it, the more I feel like it's just going to be a different competition, but it has some really intriguing, like, possibilities when you look at the fact that you're going to have essentially a pool of 24 teams that you're seeding out. And so I think this could get interesting in kind of a new and unique way that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, I will say what I like about this is I love the fact that all the teams play basically within a day or two of each other the whole time through. I love that the fact that all 18 games will be kicking off simultaneously on the last day. And they've used a supercomputer to build it out. And they actually showed a scenario where, like, with, like, just basic reason of, like, average of points won, where, like, 14 different teams could be both up for a top 8. And 6 of those teams could also be eliminated in the same day because all these games are within a point or two and then goal difference. So that to me is really interesting. I also think it's going to make the bottom feeder matches where you're playing against teams that you are heavily favored against almost imperative to secure all 3 points, which I think is something that has happened too often. Like, too often a club like Real Madrid loses at home to Sheriff and still finds a way into the knockout round. Like, that was what the group stage was supposed to be, where if you lost, like, your home tie to the 4th tier team, you were going to be in tough shape. And too often that just didn't happen. And I think for the fact that we had to expand this field because there's just too many good teams in Europe and they want to make sure they were always going to expand this tournament. And once you expand it, I want to see those other teams have a better chance to actually make moves. I kind of love the top 8 go right into the quarterfinals because I think you have something really to play for. And I think that 9th to 24th positioning, I think this has a chance to be super cool outside of the fact that you're asking teams to play 2 more group stage matches and potentially play an additional 2 knockout matches. That being said, if you do your job and you get into the top 8, which you would think you would be doing if you were winning your group and you have a chance to win this thing, well, then you really don't have anything to worry about. I wanted to look at the Liverpool fixtures specifically, talk to you about them, the order in which they come, and what I really loved about this site I found was this actually shows the before and after matches for each of these fixtures along the way. So obviously the first one being a week from, I think it's this Wednesday, right? 2 weeks from, or a week from tomorrow, we will travel to play AC Milan. Paul, when we get to Milan and get to the San Siro, do you expect the same 11 that we saw against Forest? Or do you think we might get some rotation against Forest and see that kind of onslaught first team 11 that has started so far to this point in the Premier League in Milan with some tweaks against Forest?
Yeah, I mean, if it's me, I'm thiefing it up and I'm putting my B squad in Forest and Bournemouth and put my A squad smack dab in the middle of that, right? That's what makes sense. We'll probably see a mix, right? We're probably going to see a mix of like experience throughout that side, but I definitely would be using that soft landing spot right before and after to get some rest and rotation in, and go with a healthy 11 for Milan. Bologna, you can really do a similar thing there. It's going to get that match day 3 is pretty brutal, man. Like you're running from a Chelsea squad that always plays physical against us, even when they aren't good. The Leipzig, and then flipping over 4 days later and hitting Arsenal away. So that's a tough one. Doesn't get much easier on match day 4, especially with Villa always kind of being a bogey team and Brighton looking really good right now. So it looks like on the front end, if you can get off to a hot start and you can really do well on 1 and 2, it sets up nicely the rest of the way.
Yeah, I definitely think that AC Milan one, I mean, I know everyone's going to be screaming for Chiesa to get a start, in Italy. I don't know that you start him against AC Milan because I think, to your point, I think you should be starting. I think Mo will probably be the one player of the front three that starts both the Forest and Milan match. If anything, I could see him maybe having a bench against Bournemouth, and maybe you let Chiesa start against Bournemouth, and if he plays really well, you sub him off. Then you start him against West Ham, and then maybe you come back and give him the start against Bologna at home, something along those lines. Yeah. I mean, I know you want to reward a player, but I don't think you're sitting Mo Salah in your first Champions League match away at the San Siro against a team that won the Scudetto 2 years ago. I just don't think that's smart business. I do think he's playing there. I could see some I could see some of the South American players that were called in. I know that there's talk of McAllister potentially having a little bit of a knock at the Argentina camp. Like there's some things out there that people were talking about. So maybe you sit him against Forest and you start a Jones or you start another player. Maybe Harvey gets a start in one of these matches. It's going to be a time where Gakpo or Darwin gets a start here. You're not just going to keep rolling out the same guys, I don't think, in the league. But what would you do when it comes to the defense? Would you start to rotate the fullbacks? Like when we're talking about, Trent's just gone out and played international minutes. Like, do you think Bradley's probably?
Yeah, I 100% would be. I mean, I would 100% be playing. I think the great thing about Bradley is you have a Premier League ready young fullback, right? Like you don't need and what I mean by that is he doesn't have to be a rotational piece. Like he can go out and play 90 minutes if you need him to, because he's done it. And he's done it at a high level for a period of time. So for me, I'm using that Forest game to do at least Bradley, and then we find out how much he really hates Costas, if Costas can get in or not. Because I really think what I don't want to see, and I don't think anybody wants to see, is Andy Robertson for 120 minutes over the course of 9 days, right? I think so. That's going to be really interesting to see whether we get a Gomez sighting out there. If we do get Gomez out there, we know that he just hates Costas.
Well, I think we know. I mean, I think everybody in this area just hates Costas. That's what it really comes down to. If I were asking you up front, what will you sign off for out of these 4 fixtures on the front half of the, and now I jump a screen, on the front half of the 8 fixtures that we have to play, right? Because it's 8 group
Yep.
matches, and I give you points total here. What do you think Liverpool should shoot for? I mean, obviously we want 12 points, but what do you think is like mandatory out of these 4 fixtures to put yourself in a position to get one of those 8 guaranteed spots into the quarterfinals? Because to me, that should be the goal, is getting one of those 8 spots and getting one before match day 8.
Well, if you want a shot at this, I think anything 10 or higher is obviously an excellent start. I think 8 is where I draw the line here. I think you need 8 out of this.
So you'd say 8, but you'd be happy. You'd be okay with 9 and a loss. Like you'd take 3 wins and an L.
I would.
If you were to look at this, Leipzig away, Milan away, Leverkusen at home, and Bologna at home, obviously the lowest of all the sides, of kind of a shock Champions League inclusion in their first year back in the Champions League in a long time. Is it the Leverkusen match at home, coupled by Brighton and Villa, or is it that trip to Germany in between Chelsea and Arsenal that probably worries you the most from a fixture standpoint?
It's probably the Leverkusen one, just because of what they can do from an attacking standpoint, right? I mean, it's that game's almost strength v strength, right? I think in a weird way. So I think it comes down to that one for me. Typically, unless we're playing those like Atlanta sides that are just like back alley scrapyard fights, like I think we match up okay against Milan. Bologna, I'm not worried about. Leipzig, I'm really not worried about either, although they can cause issues too. My gut says that last one, match day 4, is the one that I look at as probably potentially the most tricky of the lot.
I definitely think it is. I will say, you can't underestimate a team that just ended the other team's, year-long win streak. It was Leipzig that finally beat Leverkusen. Leverkusen has looked like they might be slightly coming back to earth a little bit from that run they had last year. They lost a couple key pieces. You never know by November. We all joke this thing could change very quickly and they could be 9 points behind Bayern in the Bundesliga. And people literally might be questioning what's going on with the club because that's how quickly things can change. So only reason I say Leipzig is because of the 2 fixtures around it, specifically the Arsenal fixture 4 days away. I think if you're the manager and you're going to Arsenal and what could be your biggest fixture of the first half of the season before playing City, that has to at least be in your mind. And by the 3rd match, I really hope we do have 6, if not 4 points already secured, because if you need a win in that Leipzig match, you might be exploiting yourself for the Arsenal match. So it could be interesting there. John Santos joins. Thank you, John. Leverkusen is the most difficult because of the quality they have. I don't disagree they have the most quality. Again, I just kind of come back to what I just said. You never know what could change in 2 months' time. Ryan Shelton says, I agree with Gally. I will say this on the record. This month, next month, or in 2 months' time, that is probably not a good idea on this channel or any other media for that matter. Let's look at the second half of the Champions League runout. So maybe the tastiest fixture, I believe, on paper, of the entire Champions League draw is Real Madrid at Anfield. Probably biased there. That match is sandwiched right in between Southampton and Man City. Thank you, schedule makers, and go fuck yourself. Honestly, could I hate to say it, could this be an instance? Is this the instance where you have to mail one in and rotate for Madrid?
You just play super conservatively. I don't know, because Like this reminds me as a kid, like growing up in the Northeast, you can relate to this. It feels like you're in the hot tub jumping into the snow. Like, you know what I mean? Going from Southampton to Real Madrid coming in. Like, it's just a real weird one. I think you got to almost slow roll it and play just a super conservative, like, back line, just recycle possession, play boring football, and just see if you can bleed one out and get lucky on a counter type thing. Like, I think that's what I could see there, especially, you know, you got to turn around and you get a couple sleeps in before you're playing City. But yeah, that's especially when you look at the other ones: Everton, Fulham, Brentwood, Ipswich, Bournemouth. It's just ridiculous.
Well, to me, I think that's where I do genuinely question like how you attack this, because I do feel like you have to be confident that you can pick up 7 to 9 points in the last 3 match weeks. And to me, this is also all coupled with, you know, we talk about, you know, the way that this works. And I'm not exactly sure how the dates line up here, because this is match day 5 and match day 6, but maybe they flipped these or either had the wrong dates. So I don't know if I have them in the wrong order or the graphic is just incorrect. But it looks to me like Girona's going to be before Real Madrid, because the 7th of November comes before December 1st.
Typically how that calendar works.
So it could just be that they had their graphics wrong. I apologize here.
But so here's my question for you, Gally, because, you know, if you ask the manager on this, right, if you ask anybody this, they're going to say, oh, we take every game individually. We go out to win every single match. Do you believe that, or do you think that's coach speak?
I think it's absolutely coach speak, because I think, all right, I'll say this. I think that there are many managers who say that absolutely, and it's coach speak. I think we witnessed it for 9 years that a manager believed it.
Yeah.
Which is why he started players in dead rubbers on the road in Europa League qualifiers, and then lost leagues because of it.
Yeah.
And we love the man, but that's what he did. Like, let's just be real. He played the same 11 every day until he ran the wheels off him, and then he argued that he needed to buy 3 more players and would only get 2 and get mad because he only got 1 that he wanted. But ultimately, I do think this is about the attrition of this contest. And I do think that you can start a strong side against Real Madrid without putting out your best 11 that weekends. I'm not saying you rest Mo Salah, right, but he might have to come off after 60 minutes, even if you're down 1-0.
Right.
Like, at some point, some other players, because if the aspiration is to win this league, and we all know what that means getting 10 to 15 points ahead of City by January 15th.
Yeah.
Because you ain't getting 5 points ahead of them the second half of the season. And maybe they get relegated. Maybe we have the 115 charges. But, you know, maybe the Easter Bunny shows up.
Right.
I have more faith in the Easter Bunny showing up this year. Hell, I have more faith in Jesus knocking on the door and waking me up that morning and being like, hey, good morning. There's a better chance of Jesus showing up here than there is probably Man City getting the 115 charges found on them or them getting relegated. So the way I look at it, it's just, you know, I really think it's more about where we go with this and how, more importantly, how the team responds to all these extra matches. So if I were to ask you, knowing it's 36 teams, you know, 8 go through, how many points do you believe is going to be needed, knowing every team's playing 8 matches on hand? What do you think is going to be needed for the top 8? And what do you think will be roughly needed to just at least get yourself into that knockout round?
I think 16 to 18 gets you into the top 8. And I think you probably need – I think you're going to need at least 9 to get into the bottom, that 24 up pod.
That's about what I was saying, because I think there are going to be some sides that walk out of this thing with 2 or 3 points.
Yeah.
Like I think 2-3 teams will be eliminated by the time we get to week 17, 8, to week 7, 8.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be enough sides in there somewhere between 9 and 10 points that'll get them into that lowest levels.
Yeah.
I do think a team with like 16 to 17 points will squeak into the top 8 with a really good goal difference.
Yeah.
Which is another reason I think it's going to be absolutely crucial that the big clubs just thrash the smaller sides. If you're up 2-0 in one of these matches, you need to go for the jugular. Like literally, that's when I'd send on Darwin. I'd be like, go score 5, kid. We're up 3-0. Go have it. Like, I don't care if you run offside. You can score 3 offsides as long as you score 3 onsides. Go do your thing. Like, because I do think that is going to be important. Because I think goal difference is going to be a big key here. So before we jump off the Champions League, do you know what my favorite thing about this entire format is?
What?
And I think the thing that's been glossed over all of this. There's no more parachuting into the lower competition.
Yeah.
So
I thought you were going to say it was the organized corruption, but I wasn't 100%.
Well, no. I mean, that we all know I love that. I called it the Super League at the beginning. No, I love, though, like, I remember when we were in the Europa League. And I wanted to win it because that's the league we were in. That was the tournament we were in. And I hated that these teams would get parachuted down. And the idea I'd have to like see United go on and win a tournament that they got jettisoned from another one. And then last year, Europa League teams are going into the conference. It's like a team in the conference has waited all their life to qualify, get to a knockout round. And now they play a club that almost qualified for the Champions League.
Can you imagine if they did that shit in boxing? Like you won your welterweight and then a heavyweight loss and came down into your welterweight division. Like,
yeah, it's basically exactly what – that's exactly what it is. So I actually like that, and I love the fact that the winning out of those still progress you into the tournament ahead, which allows teams to go for it. So before we get to kind of previewing the next match here coming up, before we get to talking about this, and going forward, I did want to bounce one thing off you. So the Champions League draw happened at the same time the League Cup draw happened, and we were drawn against West Ham, which I think we play 2 weeks from tomorrow or 2 weeks from today, in our first round of the League Cup. And there's been a lot of talk in England about how there's too many football matches, how unfair this is this year, that not only do they already move the teams into the next rounds of the League Cup, they actually gave a bye to every Premier League side that was in Europe. An extra bye, because they couldn't fit the fixtures in with the extra Champions League matches. Is it time, Paul, that they just change the way the League Cup works and say, if you qualify for Europe, this cup's not for you. This cup is for all the other clubs in England to try to go win something? Because it feels like these European sides already get favor, have VAR at their home fields, which aren't on the road. Like, I know Brian Shelton says scrap the League Cup, but my argument is that League Cup is what allows
that League Cup is
to
somebody
win
else's
trophies.
story of the season,
So I almost wonder, like, what would it hurt if none of the teams in Europe were in it, but all the other teams in England had a chance to win something? Would that be that bad? Or am I just thinking like the big-hearted football fan and not the actual realist, because I'm the one normally talking about follow the money stupid and knowing the sponsors don't want it? But I'm not sure anyone's bought whatever that moose drink is since it came out. So
I think I'm sorry. You should see this dog. This is ridiculous. You can't see it because of the green screen. This dog is like trying to push me off the chair. Anyway, so here's my thing. I think that what's hilarious about this is this all goes back to the same thing we just talked about. I think we're only having this conversation because there's a lack of parity in this league. Like, if there was more parity in this league, I think we wouldn't care because I think we know that this would be competitive across the board. But what we're tired of is we're tired of seeing City, basically win, 3 things a year. Maybe United. It's the same 5 or 6 teams that between Chelsea, United, Liverpool, Arsenal. I'm going to leave Tottenham out of this conversation for obvious reasons, and City. Though it's one of those teams, right? And if it's not one of those teams, it's a big story. And I think that we've just gotten back to the point where there is no parity in this league anymore. And if we did have that, this returned to the Premier League of 10, 15 years ago, you had a couple favorites, but outside of that, you had 10, 12 teams that could legitimately make a run at top 4. I think that we aren't even having this conversation. So I think we either need to accept football for what it is now and know that this is only going to get worse and there's going to be less and less parity. And in that position, we change the cup structure. And I'm with you. Maybe we make this only for non-European teams, or we take a look and seriously look at what is causing this in the Premier League and see, is this something that we can change in the Premier League, or is this a symptom of world football as it is now and affecting all the other leagues the same way? And I don't have an answer for that.
Sir Z says the FA would never scrap the League Cup. And I don't think anyone here, I know Brian Shelton said scrap the League Cup. Maybe that's what he was responding to. I'm more talking about just changing the way it is or trying to make it more of a cup for teams that will take it seriously. And I think that's the other issue. You take West Ham, for example. West Ham takes this competition seriously because it likes to win. It's trying to win things again. It won that Europa Conference Cup. It's gone deep in an FA Cup run a few years back. West Ham takes this competition seriously. And then they see, Chelsea get, drawn against a 5th-tier side. Great for the 5th-tier side. And they get drawn to go to Anfield in the first round that they have to play a Premier League team. And they're like, wait, we get Liverpool at Anfield. Are you bleeping serious?
Right.
We would have given everything we had and started an actual side here. They'll start their reserves and probably beat us. And I just feel like that is something that probably has to be something that makes other sides not want to take the competition seriously. So speaking of serious competition, whether it will be or not, we'll see. This weekend, Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, I believe it is, on Peacock, because why would it be on television for USA? Let that guy, somebody send that guy at the piggery a warning that the game's going to be on Peacock this Saturday. Okay, 10 a.m. If you're going to be there, please get on there. So, Paul, we talked about lineups, specifically front 3. Who starts for you on Saturday, and who do you think Arne Slot will start on Saturday?
Oh, man. For me, I would probably do Jota, Gakpo, Mo, front 3, Forest. Who do I think it will be? I think it will be Mo. What does he do here? I don't know. Does he start? I don't know what he's going to do. I think it's probably going to be – I could see him do the same starting front 3 and then just subbing people off at 60.
Yeah, I'd love to see at least one piece of rotation, whether that's Gakpo for Diaz. Brian Shelton jumped in and said in the comments, I don't know when Colombia's last game. Sometimes these South American teams are really late. If Diaz were coming back late, I could see potentially starting Gakpo. I know that Darwin was suspended. This was going to be what I said from Sir Z, Salah, Gakpo, Nunez. And I think both Sir Z and I would agree you'd see Nunez in the center there. I don't know if Darwin went away with Uruguay for international break, even though he's suspended. If he stayed in Liverpool and he's been training at the side, I could definitely see him getting his first start in this match, knowing the big match at the San Siro. Still don't really know what's going to happen. How about the midfield, Paul? Do you want to see changes? I feel like Maka probably could use a rest, especially with all the flights back and forth to South America more than any other player.
Yeah.
And he has looked a little dogged at times. And I don't know that he's gotten a second off so far this campaign. He's one of the guys who I think has played every minute of every game. But I also think Soboslai has as well.
Yeah, I'm not. Where do we know where Jones is at?
The talk was he was training, but I don't know that he's fully fit. And I don't know you rush a guy back that
Yeah,
can get
no, I was
injured
going to
again.
say I would sub Jones in. I'd tell you who I would start in a pivot. I would start Gravenberch and I would start Endo. And I know people aren't going to love that. But I think Endo is a great match against a body like Sangare in the middle of that Forest lineup. It's just a big body that needs somebody at his feet. I think Endo kind of plugs in nicely in terms of just a personal matchup if Sangare starts. That's what I do. I do Endo Gravenberch back there. We'll see what happens here, but it's to me it makes sense. And then you sub in a Jones and give Gravenberch out of there, 60, 70-minute mark.
And would you start Soboslai in that world? You're not going to make two changes and bring in Elliott and Endo probably to upset. I mean, what's been a very balanced midfield.
I don't think
Soboslai has been consistent at least.
Right.
I don't think he's been as great as people make him out to be. I think that's part of how poor he was the second half of last season. But to be fair to something Timuchin has talked about a lot, his work rate and effort this year has been head and shoulders to what it was last year, which probably makes Klopp be like, where was all this running?
Yeah. And to that point, he doesn't look like he's going to – I mean, obviously you don't want to run the legs off him, but from a stamina standpoint, he looks really good. Like, I don't see the way that Soboslai is playing right now. There's not a lot of drop-off in the 80th, 90th minute with him than there has been in the 20th. He's finishing games the way he starts them right now, which leads me to believe that if you're going to have a piece stay the same and you need a place to go 90, maybe it's Soboslai. Maybe he's the guy that plays both those matches.
And at the back, you making changes. I mean, I'm not touching the center back pairing until they give me a reason to touch it. And they can start in the San Siro together if they need to.
Yep.
I think this is Canate for sure. I wouldn't be shocked to see Quansah get a start in Italy. Slower league. Maybe you think his technical ability is just as good. It's not like they still have Ibrahimovic anymore at AC Milan. It's not Olivier Giroud. It's more of a fluent attacking side than it is a point forward system. But in this match specifically, do you come out of an international break and not start Trent, or do you think that probably sends a weird message? And maybe the right answer is what Brian Shelton's saying, which is Tsimikas or Gomez for Robo, probably no one was asked to do more physical or emotional work than Robertson is every single international break when Scotland calls him in.
Yeah, so for me, I'm starting Trent and I'm pulling him at the 60-minute mark for Bradley. I'd love to see Gomez at left back. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think when you look at – I think you hit the nail on the head a couple weeks ago. You were talking in Discord about how the substitution patterns have gone. And he does rotate most heavily out wide. So, it makes sense to me that those would be the rotational spots we see.
And give me a prediction score. Big player, what to watch for.
I'll go 3-0. Good guys. I think the key here is they see all things start and end with Chris Wood for good and bad. I think you got to body up on him and you got to be accountable for where he's at. Force have got some good pieces, though. They've got some nice, attractive, they've got some nice young kids on that team. So I think there's a lot of youth and energy. I think we have a tendency to think it's going to be this cumbersome, clunky side because of the way Chris Wood is and how he plays and how he's sort of almost like a throwback old school striker. But they've got a lot of new school pieces around him, so I think we just need to be accountable and like, you know, not cheat ourselves and be honest about what that looks like for us, and be, you know, like, you got to watch whether it's Hudson-Odoi or Alonga. They've got some speed up there, there's some pace up there, but I think
Gibbs White.
I think Wood is I think Wood is the big one. I think Wood and Gibbs White are the two ones that you got to basically try to neutralize.
Yeah, I am gonna say I picked a clean sheet in all 3 matches in my predictions so far. I think I got 2 out of 3 of them right. But I am gonna say 3-1 because I do feel like this is the match maybe where playing out from the back makes the mistake. I do think at some point we will get picked off on a set play, or there'll be something, because there have been some frailties in the back 4 there, even though they've kept clean sheets. And I think if there's a team that could do it, it could be a gross Chris Wood header. I don't think we'll be down 1-0 a minute into the game and have to come from behind. And I think that's the big difference from this side to last year. We don't chase things anymore. I feel like we play from in front. But I also think there are going to be times where we're up 3-0 and we're trying to see out a game and we give up a goal. And you're going to see the manager get pissed off, and I think we're going to love it. This is going to look like what happens when Arsenal gives up a late goal and their whole defense is pissed off because they were all fighting all match long for that clean sheet. And it almost looks like we have that back to us. So we are going to talk about this really quick. So big news over the weekend was Pochettino to the U.S. men's national team. They have done a great job covering this on the morning show, a little bit on some of our other programs. There's a video up on our YouTube page. I strongly recommend checking it out. Paul, I know you're not a huge fan of the U.S. men's national team or the setup. I think we both disagree on how they go about it. Can we agree that if you're looking for a manager, the first thing you should do is find one that is outside of the class of the player in your setup? And I do believe they may have found that. Whether it'll work or not, do we agree that this was a smart hire by the U.S. right now?
This is the first time in my lifetime that we've hired a legitimate manager that has managed at the elite level in European club that is still within the prime of his career. Typically when we've gotten these, it's their swan song or they've been out and they come back, right? So, yeah, I'm not going to get overly excited, but I think this is as good as it gets. If you're a U.S. men's national team fan and you follow this club, this is about as good as you could possibly wish for.
Yeah, I think as someone who has been known to rip on them, rant on them, follow them, but also like kind of hate them all at once, no one in our Discord or on here would question my love for Greg Berhalter, his extra G's, the first G, the second G, or the third one. All of them stands for fucking Galley would kill you if he could, basically in one line.
Thought it stood for great.
Great, like Tony the Tiger. And he ain't that great, or his Nike sneakers. But I will say this. To me, the most exciting thing is for what it might mean for the players that have been frozen out that may be called back in. Like, people don't realize that for 2.5 years, John Brooks was the best defender for the United States national team and was starting in the Bundesliga. He had a rough patch of his career. He really fell off. He fell out with Greg Berhalter right away, and Berhalter wouldn't call him in while he was playing in the Bundesliga too, and then would never call him back in after he publicly criticized him in the media. He would still be the best center back in the setup, in my opinion, right now. And I think that's a guy Pochettino will absolutely call in. So it's things like that that I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see if he will care about who's playing in the MLS compared to who's sitting on benches in Europe. I'm excited to see if he'll say, hey, Gio Reyna, if you don't go find a club that you can actually play at, you're not going to get called into my side. Because I think he is a manager with enough cachet to do that. And the fact he's bringing his own coaching staff makes me know that they gave him enough carte blanche that he's going to get a say in changing the setup. I know a lot of people believe he'll be out as soon as this World Cup ends. I kind of disagree. I think if they can get out of this group stage, which you should be able to do on home turf, as long as you don't get a massively negative draw, I think they're in a really good position to kick on. And We can clown all we want and laugh. They don't play enough good competition, but when you have a better manager, and we saw this with Klinsmann got us better friendlies because Klinsmann was a draw in those countries. And Pochettino will be a draw in Argentina. He's a draw in Spain. He's a draw in France, and he's a draw in England. And I think that gets you friendlies in European cities against European countries. And that can only make you better. And to me, that's my most exciting part is that I feel like, again, we may end up being a laughing stock, right? If Canada wipes the floor with us and moves on further in a World Cup that we're allowing them, to host a small portion of on their soil. But ultimately, the U.S. men's national team couldn't have embarrassed themselves any more than hiring Greg Berhalter the second time, let alone the first time, in my opinion. And to land a guy like Pochettino at this part of his career with the pull that he has, and don't kid yourself, I think it'll also help with some of the dual nationals out there that consider. And I ain't talking about the ones from England that everybody thinks about. I'm talking about the ones from South America that know there's a South American now coaching the U.S. men's national team. Those are the 19-year-olds coming to the MLS to play. And it is a hell of a lot harder to get into the Venezuela, Paraguay, or the Argentinian setup, the Colombian setup, than it is to get into the United States men's national team setup, no matter what Alexi Lalas or the talking heads on Fox want you to hear. So, for all of us here at American Scouser, thank you for watching. As always, get on over to the YouTube page, give it a like, give it a subscribe, sign up for all the notifications, follow all the shows, Monday Night Podcast, Premier League show, panel show, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, morning coffee brought to you by Reckless, as well as the Thursday night podcast and fantasy shows that we clip out and post on YouTube. Don't forget to check out our Instagram page. We'll be here for pre-match and post-match on Saturday. Bickler, do you have anything else as we wrap this thing up?
Just looking forward to telling Tim that we went 2 minutes over because you were talking about Berhalter.
Yeah, that's how it works, You had to expect it. It's how the programs work. I think they went 7 to 9 minutes over without us last week, and he used the argument that it was a Turk, a Scouser, and an Irishman. So therefore, I guess it's just two dumb Americans. So 2 minutes and 45 seconds doesn't seem that far off. All right, everyone. Have a great week. As always, thank you for watching. For everybody here at American Scouser TV, we appreciate you as always, and we will talk to you soon.